behind her, fading into a trail of ghosts she could never return to. She was 6 months pregnant, and running from the man who swore he would protect her, the same man who ruled the streets like a god. Adrian Moretti, the name whispered like sin, like power, like death itself. Elena's heart pounded as she looked at the road ahead, her eyes flickering to the small silver cross hanging from the mirror. "Please," she whispered, "just let me get far enough before he finds out." Behind her, the dark skyline pulsed with red and blue, the glow of searchlights, the hum of engines hunting for her. She pressed her foot harder on the gas, ignoring the tears, ignoring the voice that still echoed in her mind, the voice that once promised forever. "If you ever leave me, Elena, I'll come for you." But tonight she didn't care. She wasn't leaving him for herself. She was leaving for the tiny heartbeat she carried inside. And as thunder rolled across the night sky, Elena Moretti disappeared into the storm, a ghost of the Mafia's forbidden love, carrying his blood and a truth she would never be able to hide forever. 3 years passed since that night. The rain, the fear, the sound of tires on wet pavement, they'd all faded into the corners of Elena's memory. Now, the mornings were different. Softer, quieter. She lived in a small coastal town in Maine, far from the noise, far from the name she could never say out loud. Every sunrise felt like forgiveness. She'd wake before dawn, light a single candle by the window, and watch the ocean breathe against the sand. Her son, Luca, would come running into her arms, his tiny feet patting against the wooden floor, his laugh echoing through the little house she now called home. He had Adrian's eyes, that deep, stormy gray that could silence anyone in a room. Sometimes, when Luca looked at her like that, calm, observant, and too mature for his age, she'd feel a shiver run through her chest. Not fear, not guilt, just the haunting reminder of the man she once loved and the life she left behind. Elena worked at a small bookstore by the pier. It wasn't much, but it gave her peace. She'd spend her afternoons surrounded by old pages and sea air, her heart steady for the first time in years. People in town knew her as Elena Carter, quiet, gentle, maybe a little mysterious. No one asked too many questions, and she never offered answers. But some nights, when the wind howled and the house creaked, she'd hold Luca a little tighter. The world she'd escaped from still lived somewhere out there, in dark alleys, in quiet phone calls, in the blood that ran through her child's veins. She often told herself Adrian would never find her. He was a powerful man, yes, ruthless, feared, untouchable, but the world was big and she was careful. Still, deep down, she knew something truthfully dangerous. No one ever really escapes a man like Adrian Moretti. And someday, somehow, their paths would cross again. It started with a phone call. Elena was shelving books at the store when the old rotary phone behind the counter began to ring. Hardly anyone ever called there. Her fingers hesitated before she picked it up. Harbor Books, good afternoon. Silence. Then a low breath on the other end. She froze. The voice that came next was calm, deep, and too familiar to forget. "You still sound the same." Her heart stopped. That voice, the one that used to whisper promises against her skin, the one that could silence an entire room with a single word. "Adrian," she whispered. "I've been looking for you," he said quietly. "For a long time." She dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a dull thud, the dial tone echoing through the small shop. Her hands trembled as she locked the doors and pressed her back against the wall. It couldn't be happening. Not after all these years. Not after she'd built this life, this fragile peace. That night, she barely slept. Luca's soft breathing beside her was the only thing keeping her grounded. She brushed her fingers through his dark hair and whispered, "It's okay, baby. It's okay." But she knew it wasn't. The next morning, she noticed a black car parked near the pier, windows tinted, engine running. She felt the air shift, that old, cold fear returning to her bones. Adrian Moretti didn't need to knock. He didn't chase people. He waited, and somehow he always found what he was looking for. As Elena held Luca's small hand walking down the street, she felt eyes on her. The kind that didn't blink, the kind that remembered everything. A voice inside her whispered, "It's too late to hide now. Somewhere out there, the man she once loved was coming closer, not out of anger, but out of something far more dangerous, obsession." The day Adrian Moretti found her, the sky was gray, the kind of gray that carried memories. He stood at the edge of the pier, hands in his pockets. the wind lifting his coat as the waves hit the wooden posts below. For years he'd searched, through cities, through names, through lies. Every lead, every whisper, every rumor of a woman with dark hair and sad eyes led nowhere. Until now, his men had traced a purchase, a small bookstore in Maine, paid in cash. No records, but the name she used? Elena Carter. He smiled bitterly. Even in hiding, she couldn't let go of her first name. He didn't send his men inside. He came himself. He wanted to see her eyes when she realized the past had finally caught up. Inside the store, Elena was reading to Luca, a children's story about a lost star finding its way home. Her voice was soft, warm, and filled with love. When the bell above the door chimed, she didn't look up at first, but then she felt it, that stillness, that shift in the air that only one man in the world could bring. She lifted her head slowly, and there he was, Adrian. He looked older and sharper, but his eyes, those same gray eyes that once held her world, were unchanged. They searched her face, her hands, and finally, the small boy beside her. Luca stared back, curious, innocent. Adrian's breath caught. His world, built on power and violence, suddenly stopped moving. The boy's eyes, his eyes, were the same stormy gray that stared back at him in every mirror. Elena. His voice was quiet, almost broken. Is he? She couldn't speak. Words died in her throat. Luca looked between them, sensing something he couldn't understand. He tugged at her hand and whispered, "Mommy, who is that man?" Her heart shattered in silence. The tears came before the answer. Adrian stepped closer, his expression a mixture of anger, disbelief, and something that looked too much like pain. "You ran from me, with him inside you?" Elena's voice trembled. "I had to. I had no choice." "You always had a choice," he said. But his voice cracked, soft, not cruel. "You should have told me, and risk losing him to your world?" she whispered. "No, Adrian. I ran to save him." The room went silent. The air between them carried years of love, betrayal, and longing neither could bury. He looked at Luca again, a small hand, a familiar face, and something inside him broke open. For the first time in his life, the Mafia boss who feared nothing felt completely powerless. And in that fragile moment, Adrian Moretti finally knew the truth. The blood he spent his life spilling was nothing compared to the blood that now called him father. That night, Adrian couldn't sleep. The image of the boy kept playing behind his eyes. The way he tilted his head when he was curious. The way his small fingers gripped the edge of his mother's dress. It was like watching a mirror from another lifetime. He sat alone in his hotel room overlooking the harbor. The whiskey in his glass stayed untouched, his gun resting on the table beside him. For the first time in years, silence felt heavier than noise. He had built his empire on control of men, money, and power. But nothing had prepared him for the feeling of looking into a child's eyes and seeing himself staring back. His son. The words didn't feel real. They burned in his chest like a confession. He thought about all the nights he'd spent searching for Elena. The anger, the betrayal, the obsession. He wanted to punish her, to make her regret disappearing. But now he only felt the weight of what he'd lost. 3 years of his child's life. 3 birthdays. 3 winters. 3 summers he would never get back. He remembered the night Elena left, the storm, the shouting, the slammed door. He'd told himself she'd come back, that she couldn't survive without him, but she did. She survived him. Adrian leaned back, closing his eyes, his throat tightening. He'd spent his whole life being feared, but tonight he wasn't the Mafia boss. He wasn't the monster people whispered about. He was just a man who'd been left behind by the only woman he'd ever loved. And the child he never got to hold. Outside, the waves crashed against the pier. He pressed his hand against the glass, watching the lights blur through the mist. And quietly, almost to himself, he whispered, "I'm coming back for you. Both of you. But this time I won't lose you again." Morning came quietly. But Elena hadn't slept. The sound of the ocean usually calmed her. Not today. Every crash of the waves felt like a reminder that the peace she built was now cracking beneath her feet. She stood by the window, clutching a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Luca was still asleep in the next room, his small hand resting on his favorite toy truck. Then, a knock, soft, steady, familiar. She froze. Her breath caught halfway in her chest. When she opened the door, Adrian stood there, dressed in black, the morning light cutting across his face. He looked tired. Not dangerous, not angry, just human. "I didn't come to fight," he said quietly. Elena stepped aside, uncertain, but she let him in. The smell of coffee filled the room as he looked around. The small furniture, the children's drawings on the fridge, the traces of a life he'd never known. "You've been here all this time," he said, his voice low. "While I was searching the world for you, I had to protect him," she replied. Adrian turned to her, eyes sharp, yet full of ache. "From me?" Her silence was the answer. "You think I would have hurt him?" he asked. "That I would have taken him from you? You don't understand," she whispered. "Your world, your enemies, it's no place for a child." Adrian's jaw tightened, pain flickering across his face. "You took that choice from me, Elena. You decided who I got to be." "I decided to save our son," she said, her voice trembling. "Because love wasn't enough to keep us safe." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The tension wasn't born from hate anymore. It came from something deeper. Regret. Adrian walked closer, his voice softening. "Let me see him. Not as a boss, not as a threat. As his father." Elena looked at him then, really looked, and saw the man beneath the legend. The one she'd loved once, before the money, before the blood, before the fear. "He's still sleeping," she said quietly. "But when he wakes up, you can meet him." For the first time in years, Adrian exhaled. A long, heavy breath that carried years of guilt and longing. "Thank you," he whispered. As she turned away, his voice followed her. "Elena, I meant what I said before. I'm not letting you run again." She paused, her hand trembling on the doorknob. "Then don't give me a reason to." And with that, the past and present stood in the same room, fragile, wounded, and tangled together by one truth neither could escape. Their son was the bridge between everything they'd lost, and everything they still might become. The house was quiet when Luca woke up. The morning light spilled gently through the curtains, brushing over his sleepy face. He rubbed his eyes, stretched, and looked for his mother like he always did. But that morning, there was someone else sitting in the living room, a man he'd never seen before. Adrian sat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped, trying to steady his breath. He'd faced killers, betrayed allies, and stared down death without flinching. But now, he felt his heart race in a way he didn't recognize. When Luca appeared at the doorway, holding his little toy truck, Adrian's throat tightened. "Hi," Luca said softly. "Who are you?" Adrian smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm a friend of your mom's," Luca nodded, curious. "You talk like the people on TV." A quiet laugh escaped Adrian. "Is that so?" Elena stood nearby, watching silently, her arms crossed, her heart pounding. The air between them was heavy with something unspoken. She could see the resemblance clearer than ever now. The same gaze, the same small habits. Even the way Luca tilted his head when he was thinking. "Do you like cars?" Adrian asked. Luca's face lit up. "I love cars. I'm going to drive the fastest one when I grow up." "Is that right?" Adrian smiled faintly. "Then maybe I can show you one someday." The boy grinned, then hesitated. "Mommy says strangers shouldn't make promises." Elena's lips curved into a weak smile. "He's right." Adrian looked at her, something breaking inside him. "Then maybe I'll earn the right not to be one." Luca climbed onto the couch, sitting next to him without fear. "You have the same eyes as me," he said innocently. Adrian's world stopped. The words were simple, but they hit like thunder. He looked into those eyes, gray and unguarded, and felt everything he'd built his life upon begin to crumble. The walls, the violence, the power, none of it mattered now. "Yeah," he said softly, "I guess we do." Elena turned away, tears pooling in her eyes. She knew this moment would come, the connection neither time nor distance could hide. Adrian leaned forward slightly. "You take care of your mom?" Luca nodded proudly. "Always." "Good," Adrian said, his voice almost breaking. "You're doing what I should have done." The boy didn't understand the weight behind those words, but Elena did, and as she watched them, father and son, strangers bound by blood, she realized something she hadn't felt in years: hope. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't safe. But it was real. For the first time, Adrian Moretti wasn't a mafia boss. He wasn't a monster or a myth. He was simply a man, looking at the piece of himself he never knew he'd been missing. For a few days, the house felt lighter. Adrian stayed close, careful not to push too hard. He didn't demand answers. He didn't make promises. He just stayed, fixing things around the house, making Luca laugh, and learning how to exist in a world that wasn't built on power or fear. Elena tried to ignore the part of her heart that still remembered his touch, his voice, and his warmth. But the truth was cruel. She never really stopped loving him. She only learned how to hide it behind survival. One evening, they were sitting on the porch. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and rain. Luca was drawing something on the wooden floor, a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands. Adrian watched quietly. "What are you drawing?" "My family," Luca said with a grin. "Me, Mommy. And you." Adrian's breath caught. He didn't respond, just reached over and ruffled the boy's hair gently. Elena saw the softness in his eyes and felt her defenses weaken again. But peace never lasts long when your past is painted in blood. That night, as Adrian stepped outside to take a call, his expression changed. His man on the line spoke fast, urgent. "Boss, we've got a problem. Someone's asking questions about a woman in Maine. Word is, they think she's connected to you." Adrian's jaw tensed. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Who?" "Lorenzo's crew. They're still angry about what happened in New York." Silence. Then the cold edge of the Mafia boss returned, the side of him Elena had tried to forget. "Keep them away from here," he said. "If they find her, if they even see my son, I'll burn everything they own to the ground." He ended the call and stood in the darkness for a long time, staring out toward the ocean. The wind cut through his jacket, but he didn't move. The piece he'd found was already cracking. When he came back inside, Elena looked at him. She could read his silence like a language. "Something's wrong," she said quietly. He didn't deny it. "Someone knows you're here." Her heart dropped. "Adrian, I'll handle it," he said firmly. "No one's touching you or Luca." "You said that once before," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And we lost everything." Adrian stepped closer, eyes dark but steady. "Not this time." He touched her face gently, a rare softness in his voice. "I'm not just protecting you because you're mine. I'm protecting you because you're all I have left." Outside, thunder rolled over the ocean, the same way it had the night she ran from him. But this time she didn't run. She just looked at him, torn between fear and faith, because deep down, she knew one truth neither of them could escape. The past wasn't finished with them yet. The wind changed that night. The soft rhythm of the ocean that usually soothed Elena's heart now sounded restless. Like the sea itself was warning her. The air carried a weight she couldn't explain. Adrian stood outside the house, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low, measured tones. His voice was calm, but his eyes were scanning every shadow. "How close?" he asked to pause. Then a voice replied, "Too close, boss. They found the harbor road. 2 cars, maybe 3. Adrian's jaw locked. "Keep them off the main street. If they get near the house, you call me first." He ended the call and turned toward the light spilling from the window. Inside, Elena was helping Luca with his homework, trying to keep their little world normal for one more night. He wished he could freeze that moment. Her soft voice, Luca's laughter, the quiet. But peace never waited for men like him. He stepped inside, his voice low. "Pack a bag." Elena looked up, startled. "Adrian, what?" "They're coming," he said. "Lorenzo's men. I don't know how they found us, but they did." Her hands shook. "You promised, and I'm keeping that promise," he interrupted, eyes steady. "I'll get you both out." Luca watched them quietly, sensing something was wrong. "Mommy, are we leaving again?" Elena knelt beside him, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just for a little while, baby. It's like an adventure, remember?" Adrian looked at them, at the only 2 people who ever made him feel human, and felt a storm rising inside him. The streets he'd escaped were calling him back. If he wanted them safe, he'd have to become the man he swore he'd never be again. Outside, headlights flashed through the mist, distant engines. He could hear them now. Slow, searching, predatory. "Go through the back," he told Elena, pulling a small pistol from his coat and checking the chamber. "Take Luca to the cliffs. I'll meet you there." "No," she whispered. "You can't face them alone." "I have to," he said, his tone low, unshakable. "If I run, they'll chase. If I fight, they'll stop." Her eyes glistened. "You'll get yourself killed." Adrian leaned close, his forehead brushing hers. "Not tonight." He kissed Luca's head once, like a silent goodbye, and stepped out into the darkness. The sound of the ocean grew louder, the wind colder. Behind him, the door closed, sealing off the last light in his world. The Mafia boss was gone. What walked into the storm was something else. A father defending the only thing left worth dying for. The night was heavy with mist, the kind that swallowed sound and blurred the line between land and sea. Adrian moved through it like a shadow, his coat snapping in the wind, the cold air biting his skin. The pier stretched ahead, silent, endless, lit only by the pale flicker of dying street lamps. He could smell the salt, the rust, and the danger. A low growl of engines rolled in from the road. Headlights cut through the fog, 2 cars slowing to a stop near the loading dock. Doors opened. Boots hit wet concrete, Lorenzo's men. Adrian crouched behind a stack of crates, his hand steady on the gun. He counted the footsteps, 4, maybe 5. They were laughing, cocky, and unaware of the ghost they were about to meet. "Spread out," one of them called. "Boss says he's close," Adrian exhaled. Then the world snapped into motion, one sharp movement. He stepped out, gun raised. 2 shots, 2 bodies dropped before the others even turned. The echo cracked across the pier like thunder. "He's here!" Bullets shredded the night. Sparks burst from metal. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Adrian moved fast, low, and deliberate, years of muscle memory taking over. He wasn't fighting for dominance anymore. He was fighting for survival. For them. A man came from behind, blade in hand. Adrian spun, the knife slicing through his coat but missing flesh. He drove his shoulder into the man's chest, slamming him into a crate before finishing it cleanly. His pulse thundered. His lungs burned. Every step, every breath was for Elena and Luca. But then, a voice cut through the chaos. Deep, cold, familiar. "You still fight like a man with something to lose," Lorenzo said, stepping out from the mist. He looked older now, sharper, dressed in black. The gold cross around his neck glinted in the dim light. "You should have stayed dead, Adrian." Adrian straightened, blood trickling from a cut on his cheek. "And miss this reunion?" "Never," Lorenzo smirked. "You took something from me. You tried to take everything from me," Adrian shot back. The 2 men circled each other, years of betrayal burning in their eyes. Then Lorenzo lunged. The fight turned raw, metal clashed, fists struck flesh, and blood met rain. Adrian's strength came not from rage, but from love. Every hit he took, every blow he gave was driven by a father's promise. Finally, Adrian twisted the knife from Lorenzo's hand and pressed it against his throat. "You'll stay away from them," he growled. Lorenzo, gasping, smirked through blood. "You think it ends with me? You don't understand what you started." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Then I'll finish it." He let him drop, leaving him on the cold, wet ground. Sirens began to wail somewhere in the distance. The fog thickened. Adrian disappeared into it, a phantom fading toward the cliffs, toward Elena, toward the only light left in his world. Behind him, the pier was quiet again. Only the ocean spoke, carrying away the echoes of violence. The wind roared against the cliffs, whipping Elena's hair across her face as she clutched Luca close to her chest. The night was black, endless, the sea crashing below like a warning from another world. Every sound made her flinch, every gust of wind, every creak of rock. She kept glancing toward the narrow path leading from the pier, her heart pounding in her throat. "Please come back. Please." Luca stirred in her arms, sleepy and scared. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" The word Daddy caught her off guard. It was the first time he'd said it, soft, uncertain, like he was testing it. Her eyes filled with tears. She brushed his hair back gently. "He's coming," she whispered. "He promised." Minutes passed. The night stretched. Then, out of the fog, she saw a shape, tall, unsteady, moving through the darkness like a wounded shadow. Adrian. He stumbled forward, blood streaked across his sleeve, his face pale and cut. When he reached them, Elena caught him before he fell. The cold rain had soaked him through, his breath rough and shallow. "You're hurt," she began. "Not bad," he lied. He looked down at Luca, who blinked up at him, small and wide-eyed, clutching a tiny toy car in his hand. The boy hesitated, then stepped closer. "Did you protect us?" Luca asked. Adrian's throat tightened. He nodded. "Yeah, little man, I did." Luca smiled, a shy, trusting smile, and wrapped his small arms around Adrian's neck. The world stopped. For the first time in years, Adrian felt whole. The weight of every sin, every scar, every sleepless night, it all broke beneath that simple, innocent touch. Elena watched them, tears running freely down her face. She'd spent years hating him, fearing him, missing him. And now, standing on this cliff with the sea raging below, she realized something she never wanted to admit. No matter how far she ran, he would always be part of her, because love that deep didn't die. It hid, it bled, it survived. Adrian reached for her hand, his voice a whisper carried by the wind. "I don't care who comes next," he said. "I'm not running again. Not from them. Not from you." Elena squeezed his hand, her lips trembling. "Then don't. We'll face it together." The storm broke open above them, thunder cracking, rain pouring down. But for once it didn't feel like chaos, it felt like cleansing. Adrian pulled her close, his arm around both of them, holding his family as if the world itself might try to steal them away. Behind them, the pier burned in the distance, the pass going up in flames. Ahead, the dawn waited, faint and gold on the horizon. Morning came softly, the kind that creeps in slow, with the sound of distant gulls and the smell of salt and smoke still lingering in the air. The storm had passed, but the world felt bruised. Elena woke first, her body aching from exhaustion, her head resting against Adrian's chest. For a moment she didn't move. She just listened to his heartbeat, steady and real, a sound she thought she'd never hear again. Outside the small cabin they'd found near the cliffs, the sun was rising, thin ribbons of gold cutting through the mist. Luca slept between them, his tiny hand resting against Adrian's arm. It felt peaceful, fragile, like a dream that could break if she breathed too hard. Adrian stirred, his voice low, rough with pain and fatigue. "You stayed." Elena smiled faintly. "You gave me a reason to." He opened his eyes, those gray eyes soft in a way she hadn't seen since before everything fell apart. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of words neither of them had the strength to say yet. She touched the bandage on his arm. "You could have died last night." He chuckled, quiet and bitter. "Would have been easier." "Don't say that," she whispered. Adrian turned his head toward her, studying her face, the same face he'd dreamed about through years of smoke and regret. "I used to think the only way to protect what I loved was to control it, to own it. But you proved me wrong." Her eyes softened. "You don't protect people by caging them, Adrian. You protect them by standing beside them." He nodded slowly. "Then that's what I'll do, from now on." For a while they sat there in quiet understanding, two people scarred by the same storm, finally learning to breathe again. Luca stirred, his sleepy voice breaking the stillness. "Daddy?" Adrian smiled, his hand brushing the boy's hair. "Yeah, buddy? Are we safe now?" The question hung heavy in the air. Adrian met Elena's gaze, the truth sitting between them. "For now," he said softly. "But no matter what happens next, I'll keep you safe. Both of you." The boy nodded, satisfied, and curled back into sleep. Adrian looked out the window toward the burning horizon, where smoke from the pier still rose faintly. He knew this peace wouldn't last. The world he'd left behind never stayed quiet for long. But for this one morning, this brief, golden moment, he let himself believe in something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Peace never lasts long when your past is made of blood. The day had started like something out of a dream. Sunlight, the smell of coffee, and Luca chasing gulls outside the cabin. For the first time in years, Elena almost believed they could have a normal life. Almost, but normal has a way of breaking in Adrian's world. It began with a sound, the soft crunch of tires on gravel. Then silence. Too much silence. Adrian stepped outside, his instincts instantly awake. The car parked a few meters away was black, tinted, and too clean for this coast. No one was inside. No driver, no passenger. Just a single envelope taped to the windshield. He approached slowly, his hand resting on the gun at his back. The wind carried the faint smell of oil and salt, and something colder. He peeled the envelope off. No name, no seal, just his symbol burned into the paper. The same mark that used to be stamped on his men's pay, his contracts, and his orders. Inside was a photo. Elena, Luca, taken from a distance, 2 days ago, and beneath it, a single line written in red ink. Lorenzo was only the beginning. Adrian's jaw clenched, his pulse slowed, steadying into that dangerous rhythm he hadn't felt since the old days. The beast inside him, the part he'd buried for Elena and the boy, stirred again. He crushed the letter in his fist. Elena stepped out, wiping her hands on a towel. What is it? He hesitated. For a second he wanted to lie, to tell her it was nothing. But the look in her eyes deserved the truth. They found us again. Her face drained of color. But how? Lorenzo's gone. Lorenzo was a lieutenant, Adrian cut in, voice low and dark. The man behind him, the real one. He's older, smarter, and he doesn't forgive betrayal. She looked at the letter, trembling. So what now? We run again? No! The word came out sharp, final. Adrian looked toward the horizon, where the sea met the sky in a pale line of light. Running only teaches them we're afraid. It's time they learn what happens when they threaten my family. Elena stared at him, at the quiet storm returning to his eyes. She'd seen that look before. It terrified her then, but now it made her feel safe. Then we fight, she said softly. He turned to her, surprised. You and me? He asked. You think I'd let you face them alone again? He smiled, that rare, dangerous smile that used to make her heart ache. You've changed. You taught me how. Adrian pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. Then they'll regret ever coming back. In the distance, thunder rolled across the sea. But this time it didn't sound like a storm. It sounded like a war waiting to begin. The city hadn't changed. It still breathed smoke and sin. Neon lights glowed like open wounds across the skyline, and the streets whispered his name as if they'd been waiting for him. Adrian Moretti. Once feared. Once gone, now reborn. The black car slid through the rain-slick streets, its engine low and steady. Elena sat beside him, silent, watching the city blur past. Every turn, every shadow seemed to hold a memory. The places they'd bled, the places they'd loved. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. Adrian's fingers tightened on the wheel. If we don't end this now, it never ends. She nodded, her eyes steady. Then we end it. He glanced at her. The woman who once ran from him now sitting beside him, calm in the storm. Something in his chest shifted. Pride, fear, love, all tangled together. The car stopped outside an old building, a warehouse near the docks. Once his headquarters, now abandoned, or so he thought. Inside, the air smelled like dust and gasoline. The floor was lined with old crates and broken memories. Adrian stepped through the darkness until his hand found the hidden switch in the wall. The lights buzzed to life, row by row, revealing a small armory that hadn't seen daylight in years. Elena's eyes widened. You kept all this? Didn't think I'd need it again? He murmured, running his hand along the barrel of a rifle. Guess I was wrong. He loaded weapons with quiet precision, each click echoing through the cavernous room. Elna helped, her movements careful but sure. He watched her handle a pistol, the same one he'd taught her to use years ago. Still remember? He asked. You don't forget the things that save your life, she said softly. He smiled faintly. You've got more fire than half the men I ever trained. She looked up at him, her voice steady. I had the best teacher. For a moment, everything stilled, the world outside forgotten. Just them, side by side, preparing for a battle they didn't ask for but could no longer avoid. Then a voice echoed from the doorway. I always wondered how long it'd take you to crawl back. Adrian turned. A tall man stepped into the light, sharp suit, gray beard, eyes like winter steel. Don Vincenzo Romano, the man who built the empire before Adrian. The one who'd once called him son. You shouldn't have come, Adrian said. Vincenzo smiled, slow and cruel. You were my heir once, boy, but you betrayed me for love. And now, you think you can protect what you abandoned? I'm not protecting, Adrian said, his voice low, deadly calm. I'm ending this, the old Don's eyes gleamed. Then come take your throne back. And just like that, the past wrapped its hands around Adrian's throat again, the world he'd bled to escape now waiting to consume him whole. Elena stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. Whatever happens, she whispered, don't forget why you're doing this. He met her gaze, and in that single look, he remembered everything that mattered. Her. The boy. The promise. Adrian slid around into the chamber, his voice a low growl. Then let's finish what they started. Midnight fell like a curse. The warehouse district burned with light, engines growling, steel doors slamming, the air thick with the scent of gasoline and vengeance. Adrian stood at the center of it all, black coat whipping in the wind, surrounded by men who once followed him, now sworn to kill him. Across the yard, Vincenzo waited, calm, poised, hands clasped behind his back like a man watching a chess game. He was certain he'd already won. "You could have ruled this city," Vincenzo called out. "Instead, you let a woman and a child make you weak." Adrian's jaw tightened. Love doesn't make a man weak, fear does. And you've lived your whole life afraid to lose what power can't buy. Vincenzo's smile faded. "Then die with your little fantasy." He raised his hand, and the night exploded. Bullets ripped through the air, glass shattered, and fire erupted. The first wave came fast and brutal. Adrian dove behind a stack of containers, returning fire with precision that came from years of killing men who thought they were immortal. Elena moved through the chaos like a ghost, using the shadows for cover, her pistol steady. Every shot she took was for the years she spent running, for every night she'd cried, holding her child in the dark. They weren't fighting to survive. They were fighting to end it. A grenade rolled across the floor, clinking against steel. "Elena!" Adrian grabbed her, pulling her down as the explosion tore through the side of the building, flames licking up the walls. His ears rang, his vision blurred, but his grip never faltered. Through the haze, he saw Vincenzo walking toward him, revolver in hand, smoke curling around his silhouette like the devil himself. "You were my son," Vincenzo said, "and you chose her over me." Adrian rose, blood dripping from his temple. "I chose freedom." They faced each other, mentor and student, father and son, sinner and man seeking redemption. Vincenzo was fired. The bullet grazed Adrian's shoulder. Adrian fired back, once, clean, straight through the chest. The old man staggered, surprise flashing across his face as he dropped to his knees. "You'll never escape me," Vincenzo rasped. "You'll become what I was." Adrian crouched, gripping the man's coat. "No," he said quietly, "because I still have something you never did." "And what's that?" "Someone to come home to." Vincenzo's body went still. The revolver slipped from his hand, hitting the floor with a final hollow clink. Silence fell, the kind that only comes after everything has burned. The flames danced around them as Adrian turned toward Elena. She was standing near the exit, the orange light painting her face in gold and ash. He limped to her, pain in every step, but his eyes, they were alive. Elena reached for him. "It's over." "Yeah," he said, voice breaking just enough. "It's over." They walked out together into the cold night, leaving the burning empire behind, a kingdom turned to smoke, a past buried beneath fire. For once, the darkness didn't chase them. It let them go. The sirens came in the distance. The city was quiet again. And above it all, the first light of dawn broke over the skyline, a thin promise that maybe, just maybe, love had won. A year later, the city looked different, or maybe it was them who had changed. The noise, the danger, the sleepless nights. All of it felt like a dream fading in the rearview mirror. The world that once hunted them now didn't even know their names. They lived by the coast now, in a small town where the ocean was always near, and the sunsets painted everything in gold. The house was simple. White porch, wildflowers by the fence, and the smell of salt always in the air. And for the first time in a long time, Adrian didn't wake to gunfire or guilt. He woke to laughter. From the kitchen came the sound of clinking dishes, Luca's voice bubbling with excitement as Elena pretended not to notice him sneaking chocolate chips into the pancake batter. "You think I didn't see that?" she said, smiling. Luca giggled. "Dad said extra chocolate makes them better." Adrian chuckled from the doorway, leaning against the frame. "Can't argue with science." Elena turned, her hair falling over her shoulder, sunlight catching her eyes. "You're supposed to be helping him with homework, not corrupting him with sugar." "I'm teaching him life skills," Adrian replied, wrapping his arms around her waist and kissing her temple. "Like negotiation." She laughed softly, that laugh he'd once thought he'd never hear again. Outside, the waves crashed gently, the sea breeze carrying the scent of morning. Luca ran past them toward the porch, his laughter echoing down the hill. Adrian watched him, free, fearless, everything he'd never been allowed to be. Elena rested her head against his chest. "You ever think about it? The life we left behind?" He nodded slowly. "Sometimes, but not with regret." "No?" "No, because it brought me here. To you, to him." She smiled. "You sound almost peaceful." Adrian looked out toward the horizon, the endless blue meeting the light. "Maybe for the first time I am." She turned his face toward her. "You deserve it." He kissed her, slow, certain, The kind of kiss that doesn't need to prove anything anymore. Just promise. In the distance, Luca called, "Come on, Daddy. The water's warm." Adrian laughed, grabbed Elena's hand, and they walked toward the shore together. No shadows, no fear. Just sunlight, waves, and a second chance. The tide rolled in, washing over their footprints. The past was gone, carried away by the sea, and for once, the man who'd once ruled the underworld was simply home, because in the end, love wasn't what destroyed him, it was what saved him. She ran from him once, pregnant, scared, and desperate to survive. Years later, fate brought her back, not into the arms of the monster the world remembered, but into the heart of the man he'd finally become. He wasn't just the Mafia boss anymore. He was a father. He was the man who learned that love isn't control. It's courage. Together, they buried the darkness of their past and built something neither of them thought they deserved, peace. And as the waves carried away the last echoes of their pain, all that remained was a promise. Love may break you, but if it's real, it always finds its way back. This was She Escaped the Mafia Boss Pregnant. Years later, he saw the child and knew the truth. A story of redemption, love, and the power of finding your way home, even after the darkest storms. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more heart-touching romance audiobooks. Until next time, keep believing in love that never dies.